I have known our next speaker for probably 8 years. I would call him a close friend. Our friendship has spanned 3 continents and many, 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 many Magento events. And in spite of him being friends with me, he has managed an incredible career trajectory which has found him heading up the Adobe practice at Valtech. He is quite simply a PWA expert and someone I'm very proud to call a good friend. So delighted to introduce Chris Brabender to the stage.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. I am Chris Brabender, and today we're going to be talking about defining the blueprint for PWA Studio projects. So I am the Adobe Practice Director at Valtech. I've been working with Adobe Commerce around 10 years now. And one of the reasons I can talk about this today is I am a core contributor to PWA Studio, and I work very closely with Adobe on building out that PWA Studio product. So today, I want to talk about why a structure to PWA Studio is very important. Unfortunately, as a new product, too many developers don't yet know how to work with this platform. It's quite complicated to work with at times. So this approach defines some consistency, a way that we can build product the same way repeatedly. And the goal here is to favor extensibility over any core overrides. And the reason we want to do that is we want to improve that long-term maintenance and upgradeability of the platform. I've seen far too many projects come to me in disrepair. They don't have a path forward to upgrade because the developers who implemented that just didn't know how to structure the project properly. So it all starts at the start. How do you even start and set up a PWA Studio project? You want to set yourself up here for long-term success. And it does kind of start with some basics. This isn't Magento. This isn't Adobe Commerce as you may have known it. It isn't PHTML templates. It is React-based. So you need to understand React as a developer to be able to go and implement a product like this. It's quite a simple little thing. So we have 2 real options when we want to start one of our projects. We can fork the GitHub repo. It is a public repository for this entire project. Or we can start with Venya concept. When we fork the repo, you get full control over what you do. You take full ownership of that code, and you can do anything you want with it. It is a monorepo-based project, so it's quite easy to work with, build extensions, and work with those core products. And you can merge in features ahead of time because you can come off the develop branch, and you can take that whenever Adobe commits directly to that repo. And you can still leverage an extensibility approach when we are looking at the GitHub repo. The problem is, developers somewhat have a tendency to just start overriding the core because the code is there in their repository, which makes it more difficult to upgrade, if not impossible at times. The one option we want to work with is Venya concept. We have versionable packages which we can install. We can easily take advantage of those new features by using an npm update. And then we can easily use a monorepo in this approach as well. And it does set us up properly for extensibility. We don't necessarily have access to the develop branch, though. So we do have to wait for releases from the core product. And we don't get to override core components, but that's actually a good thing for us because we aren't going to go and mess up our repository, our project. So we want to make our lives easier, and we want to use yarn create at Magento PWA. There's just too many complexities stemming from forking the repository of Venya. It's the one reason I've seen most projects fail. So when we talk about structuring our project, do we want to go with a monorepo, or do we not want to go with a monorepo? They're one of the big questions we have on setting up most of our projects. So monorepos are great because we can build functionality as individual packages, and we can separate code into their core components. We can also handle multi-brand deployments, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. It's also really good for agencies. So I know there's a lot of agencies here today. So if you do run an internal accelerator project or a tooling around PWA Studio, a monorepo can really help you in setting up and building that. They can be finicky at times, so understanding the ins and outs of yarn workspaces can be very important, and some of the performance issues you may have around that. But it is also powered by Yarn workspaces, so it's an industry standard set up for monorepos, and it's very easy for us to work with in general. We use a monorepo for our PWA Studio accelerator internally. It allows us to build all of our extensions as individual packages, and then whenever we commit to master, our CI process automatically builds and releases that to our private JFrog Artifactory. So we can handle all of those repositories nice and easy, and it speeds up our development by having everything centralized in that monorepo. And because we have everything in a monorepo, all of our individual packages are included here. So we're able to include and build new functionality very, very simply by just including that into our accelerator project, which is a Venia concept implementation. So we can set up nice, easy scripts for us to reuse. It really simplifies the whole development process when you're looking at building out accelerators like this. And your monorepo is kind of going to be structured like this. For us, the accelerator is a version of Venia concept, which includes the core Venia UI Peregrine packages. Then we have our extensions available. So we have quite a few extensions and even more in development. So we have Bopus, our customer account dashboard, Moneris payments, product reviews, build pack customizations, and our store locator. And all of that development happens directly in the monorepo, so we can easily build updates and release them as necessary. And then we also have a theme inside of our monorepo, which is a Tailwind CSS theme, which extends from the core Venia theme. Regardless of whether you're using a monorepo or not, though, your project is going to be structured something like this. I think one of the main things I see people missing when they're building a PWA Studio project is coding standards. They are very relevant for React development as much as PHP development. So setting up properly for ESLinting, prettier, style linting, whatever it may be, is very important. Having consistency in standards when you're implementing code helps you for implementing, building new developers, skilling them up, but also managing security and things like that. Within our source directory, we're going to have core things like root components. We're going to have compartmentalization of different types of things we want in here as well, like our aliases, being able to group them together to make it easy to manage. Our component library, and then our talons are going to be in here as well. And then all of our local styling is going to be set in the root there for our index CSS and module CSS. The big question is, how do we customize, though? How do we update or add additional functionality to components? How do we change the functionality around hooks and talons? And then how do we also apply our own styling to these projects? So you can override core components, talons and hooks, if you really want to, but that comes with risks. You could implement completely custom components as well, but again, that costs more. You have to build more code and maintain more code. You can use the extensibility framework, which is going to be my recommendation, which allows us to add customizations to the core product, but still maintain upgradeability. And then another way for us to handle styling is going to be our aliases. So overriding core components, talons, and hooks. So if you have forked the GitHub repository, please never modify a core package. You will not be able to upgrade, basically. We don't want to be doing that. And if we come from a Magento development background as a PHP developer, for example, an alias you would think of as a preference. We only ever want to use one of them as a last resort. They reduce our long-term ownership, upgradeability, and all that kind of stuff. So we really don't want to be using aliases. We can think of component overrides, like we would replace a PHTML file in one of our custom themes. And at the end of the day, the more code you override, the more difficult your life becomes. We want to override as little code as possible so that those upgrades are possible in the future. I've seen versions of PWA Studio still on 6.0, and we're now at 12.6, and those clients are unable to upgrade because they overrode too much code within the core. And he was here earlier today, but it's the same thing. Don't modify the core. It goes from Magento 1, it goes for PWA Studio. So fully replacing components with your own code is definitely an approach, and it can be used in scenarios where you really require more custom functionality that's drastically different to that core. So you're able to just replace it with your own. But the problem is you're then going to be separated from any core updates. While that may be acceptable for some businesses want to be able to leverage updates from core as Adobe introduces new product, new functionality as well. So this is a more costly approach in the long term, but can be recommended if you do have very, very specific code that you need to do. The extensibility framework really is my recommendation when customizing PWA Studio. We're able to pretty easily customize the core code. We're able to inject new JSX, new components into existing components. We're able to remove components. We're able to change props and all that kind of stuff. And it's very easy to work with. Here we can just import an AEM component, for example, into an existing product detail page through a small couple of lines, and we didn't have to override any core functionality. We can do the same through hooks and talons, through wrappers. So we're able to wrap that core hook or talon, introduce our own logic on top of that, and then supply that to our custom components or existing components. So from a styling perspective, we have a couple of options. Component overrides, which are tedious and costly, but then we also have Webpack aliases, which could be another easy option for us to work with. So we don't want to override a component for the sake of applying styling. It's overkill. We want to be able to just apply styling where necessary. We don't have to want to take ownership of all of that code, because then we have to manage that long term. And often it'll need to be a tree replacement, which is definitely not a recommended approach. So it's just too much code. We don't want to be doing this. So Webpack aliases are a pretty easy way for us to be able to customize CSS. So we can override specific CSS files as necessary, and it's a pretty low-risk approach to applying styling within PWA Studio. We can also use the normal replacement module separate from aliases if we want more targeted overrides. Aliases are a little generic sometimes with their naming convention, so we're actually able to use normal replacement module for more targeted overrides. And we really want to be leveraging CSS modules. It's a great feature within PWA Studio and React where we can compose from core. So we're able to inherit from that core styling within our aliased CSS file. So we don't have to completely build CSS from scratch. We can compose from core and apply our customizations as necessary. Quite a low-risk approach there. When it comes to organizing aliases, your Webpack config file can get pretty big at times if you're running hundreds of aliases, which is entirely possible within PWA Studio. There's a lot of components we need to style. So we have just grouped that into a dedicated Webpack aliases file, and we group that by type. We have CSS, JS, GraphQL overrides. So it helps us just make our project a little bit more organized, easier for new developers to see what's going on, easy for us to identify what we may have updated as well. The big one I want to talk about today is multi-brand PWA Studio. Not many people are doing this at the minute. We have a couple of projects on the go right now where we're implementing this approach, and I want to answer some questions around this. So one of the good things we have now is Tailwind. Tailwind gives us inheritable themes and styling, which is great. But I also want to talk about component libraries and how we would leverage monorepos and CI/CD to handle this. So a monorepo isn't necessarily required, but it's definitely going to make your lives easier. I highly recommend working with a monorepo when you're building a multi-brand implementation. You are going to need to use Tailwind CSS themes. They're very powerful. We're going to want to build a component library, so a list of customizations, functionality specific to our clients. We could want to be using targetables as well, which is the extensibility framework provided by PWA Studio. And we're going to be customizing our CI/CD process at the same time. So you may be used to inheritance in Magento for theming. That's not the case necessarily when we talk about PWA Studio. We are going to be using that composition rather than inheritance, where we build individual elements, we build them into components, we combine them, and we build full pages from that. So the composition approach is what we're going to be leveraging in our React. So our monorepo looks like this. We have a parent Tailwind CSS theme. then we separate core components into individual packages. So we have multiple packages sitting within our monorepo, and we include them in brands. So we then have brand packages, each of the different brands we have within our implementation. And then within those brand packages, we compose a Tailwind CSS theme and those component packages. So we can pick and choose what we need for different brands who may have slightly different requirements from another brand, but still want to inherit from that core brand styling guide, whatever it may be. So our monorepo looks like this for a multi-brand implementation. We have a client core, and within that, we create Webpack configuration, we put our service worker and other things. So we boost them from within the Venue concept package, and we move them up into a core package. That helps us with upgradeability. We can upgrade that core package and have it inherited by all of our different brands. If we need to do a global Webpack configuration change around bundling or whatever it may be, we're able to do that within that core as well, and then we can release that all at once. We have our client theme, which is going to be the parent theme. We can either inherit from PWA Studio theme or Venue theme, or we can build that up from scratch as a Tailwind theme. And then we're going to build out a UI library. So that component UI library is a series of components delivering specific functionality for our brand or brand. And then we have individual brand packages. Brand A, Brand B, Brand C. So this is an actual client repo. I've obviously renamed it. But we have 3 brands right now where we're inheriting from all of those other packages, and then we're building out individual releases of PWA Studio. We can include other extensions within here as well, rather than just a client UI package. So like I said, we move our Webpack config, our service workers, really to facilitate upgrades. Our client UI, we put components, we also put talons and hooks in here for our business logic, and we add those to our brand layouts. And then each brand package, it's basically a customized or slightly modified version of Venue concept. So we compose our client core, our client UI, our client theme, and then we apply brand A specific styling and individual extensions as necessary, so XYZ, or brand B, we have AYD. So we can still inherit that global framework for all of our clients, but deliver specific functionality. Say one client needs a subscription service, or one client needs a slightly customized product detail page. We're able to do that as necessary, but we still have this global component library for within our parent brand. And the composition looks something like this. So here we have a client UI library where we have a simple versus a complex header components. We have soft bundle, like Magento product bundle. We have custom mini cart. We have a custom region selector, and we have custom reviews components as well. And then brand A, we're going to compose in the simple header, but brand B, we're going to compose in a complex header. But we're leveraging all of the other same components across those 2 brands. And we're obviously inheriting our theme and core within those 2. So we use package JSON versioning in the brand packages to trigger deployments. So on commit to key branches, integration, staging, production, whatever it may be, we loop over each one of those defined brand packages, brand A, brand B, brand C, and then we build based on version changes. So if we want to release brand A, but not brand B and C, we don't update our package JSON versioning. If we want to release all of them at the same time, we do a version update for our package JSON, and then we're going to trigger release. We're going to build for each of those different brands and push them up to our environments. We also use our ENV templates or sample ENV files, so we can handle multiple locales or multiple configurations within each brand if we need to run different builds and releases for those brands as well. So within our CI/CD, we just loop over all of those brand packages, we look over our ENV templates, and then we build them independently, and then we push them up to our production environments. You could push to 1 or more production environments as well, depending on how you want to configure up your CI/CD. We use Bamboo for this, moving to GitHub Actions though, but you can use any CI/CD pipeline. We want to make this a little bit easier for everybody though. So everything we talked about, extensibility, putting a framework together and standardizing this, So we're actually going to be open sourcing our extensibility framework for PWA Studio in the coming months. So we're working right now to take everything that we've put together and build that into an open source package to make it easier for everybody to be able to work with PWA Studio. So the goal of it is to really work with extensions. There's some restrictions around extensions working with the core product. We want to sort of remove some of those restrictions and make it easier for people. Projects can then enable and disable particular functionality provided from extensions. We have naming around, basically like a layered XML has a name associated with that. We've introduced that into targetables, so you can enable and disable particular targetables overrides or whatever it may be through this framework. And as an example, we converted the MageWorks Ultimate SEO that was available on GitHub. We converted it onto this framework. We eliminated redundant GraphQL calls, so we include the MageWorks attributes directly in the original product call, and we simplified the overall installation process. There's no manual code required to enable any of this functionality, so it's a much simpler process and much more performant as well. So it's quick to work with as well. We built out a good set of extensions on this framework. So reviews, BOPUS, Store Locator, Adobe Experience Manager, MageWorks SEO, Google Tag Manager, and a B2B suite as well. We built all of this with zero core code modifications through the extensibility framework. So we inject reviews and BOPUS onto product pages. We put the store locator into the site header without any code modifications to core. The one way we would do this is through a simple and organized approach to targetables. So we don't cluster all of our targetables in a single intercept file anymore. We're able to create a productful detail.targetables.js file, for example. So within our package, we have our group logic around customizations to individual components. So we just create a new productful details targetables.js file. Our framework passes in the original component, and then you can just work on that component, like add import, insert after JSX, whatever you need to do there. So nice and easy. Same goes for styling. Breadcrumbs.modules.css, for example, we automatically include your local styling in use style. So you can then compose from core or fully replace core. So the first two examples there, we're composing root and open from core, but for our search fallback, we aren't composing, so that's our own styling applied to that automatically. You just include that file, and it automatically applies to the relevant core file. The same goes for GraphQL. One of the issues right now is able to merge in additional GraphQL attributes to core. So this allows you to create a new GQL target.js file, which allows you to add any of your GraphQL attributes. Here is the MageWorks SEO one, so hreflang, SEO markup, whatever it may be. The extension can inject these attributes into the core calls, so we don't have to run additional calls. We don't want more GraphQL calls. It reduces our performance. It's more difficult to work with. So here, nice and easy to add additional GraphQL as well. So this is coming pretty soon. We hope clients and agencies and extension providers specifically are going to adopt this. It's not mandatory, obviously. It's just a recommended approach. It's some experience that we've had around working with PWA Studio. And yeah, thanks. Any questions? I was too clear?
So Venia, are there other themes that are optimized to work with PWA Studio as well?
Themes?
Yeah.
There's not a ton of themes available for PWA Studio. It's not kind of a install a theme like you would work with Monolith. There's a couple of products in the market, but they're usually custom implementations typically. With the Tailwind approach, though, it's a little more possible to work with themes or build a theme, but not many people have adopted that approach just now.
So working with Venia is the approach, and you can customize that as you like?
Generally, yeah. We start from Venia concept, and we build up from that.
Okay.
But with the Tailwind theme, you can do a reset as well. You don't have to inherit anymore. You could build your own theme through Tailwind.
And when you listed the components earlier, I didn't see anything related to checkout. Did I miss something there, or is that...
Right now, checkout's a bit of a tricky area to customize. We're currently tossing up whether we release a custom checkout, or try and work with the core team around. We have a pull request open to core to try and make it more extensible, but waiting for that to get merged in.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
Are you doing anything with server-side rendering?
Yeah, we use pre-render IO for server-side rendering by default.
So do you pre-render all the PDPs, all the
For
category
bots.
pages?
Yeah, not for users, only for bots.
Okay.
We're waiting for the Next.js implementation before we really invest too heavily in server-side
Okay.
rendering.
How long does that take during deployment for like a large catalog?
For pre-render,
Yeah, to I
to
assume
build the cache,
you're building everything, all the PDPs.
yeah, you can, by default with pre-render, it's pretty slow, but you can work with the team if you're launching a new product. They can increase the workers, so they'll make it a lot faster to index it. We launched it for StructTube a little while back. I think they have 20,000 product pages. Took a while, but we upped the workers and have reduced it significantly. Yeah.
You said prerender.io?
Prerender.io, yeah. It's built in by default to Upward PHP as well, which is one of the reasons we work with it. We did experiment with self-hosted Rendertron, but the infrastructure requirements were too big, it was too costly, and it wasn't very stable. So we switched to Prerender.io. It's much more cost-effective and stable.
Cool.
Anyone else? Oh, all right. Thanks very much, everyone.